it sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead, treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Feeling.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Call him the wizard, and you actually probably met him at the wedding. He was the one dressed up as a wizard. He had a wizard staff.
Okay.
And I showed him the Gandalf pipe, and we used the little carb, and we smoked some reefer with it, and it was really fun. And it was
pretty
also
cool, right?
very smooth. The very long stem
cools it
down, and it's I didn't cough at all. And then we also did tobacco too, and the tobacco was excellent. I watched the video of how to pack it properly and get the cherry and whatnot, and it was very fun.
Nice, man. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it was very good.
I showed Kat the picture of you holding the pipe because she didn't even see it.
Oh, no?
No, she didn't see it before I gave it to you. So she was like, what does that mean, the wizard or whatever? And I was like, it's like Gandalf's pipe. It's like a big long, and she was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked that. That was my respite. It was so hectic. But I will say, for as far as in-laws go, they were the most respectful when they left, because when everybody packed up, the house looked exactly how it did when they came in here.
Nice.
Man, I love that type of guest.
It's the way it should be.
They even put some of the linens in the washer for us too, and did the dishes, and we didn't ask. It was before we woke up. We weren't telling them to, and when everybody boogied out on Sunday, it was 6 days, by the way.
It's a lot.
When everybody boogied out on Sunday, the house was exactly the way it was. And Shalena was like, oh, I'm going to miss them. But I was kind of jumping up and down. And I was like, look, my bed's so clean. And I laid in my bed a starfish. It was great.
That's generally how I am with really most vacations. Not even when people stay. There's a point where oh, this is great and everything. And then I'm like, all right, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's get back to normal.
Something about the bed. That's the one that I miss the most. Is
Sure.
I want to be back in my bed. And my bed is not a great bed, but it's
Did you guys have to sleep in the van?
We did. Because I had a baby. There was no other way.
No, it's snowstormed.
Well, we had a heater, and it's very insulated. I was cold the first night, but only because Shalena kept stealing the blankets. I called my mom, and my mom was like, oh my God, you're sleeping in the van? How was it? And I was like, I was freezing the whole night because Shalena was stealing the blankets. And then Shalena passed by, we were having the conversation, and my mom was like, oh, Shalena, how'd you sleep? And she was like, I slept fine. And we were like, I wonder why.
Yeah.
but we managed. It was fine.
Cool, man. Glad you had a good Thanksgiving there.
Yeah, it was great, man.
Cool. Well, first of all, hello, everybody, and welcome to The Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, and this is Akiva Miola.
Hello.
We're about to get going on to Marilyn Monroe, part number 4.
Already? Wow.
This is pretty jam-packed. I was editing through this one the other day, and I was like, man, by the time I got to the end of this episode, even though there's a lot we have to get through today, I was like, it feels short because there's so much stuff. Because I've been trying really hard to get all of this stuff kind of condensed down into 5 parts rather than 6 parts. So as a result, this ends up just feeling like things move a lot faster. So hopefully y'all enjoy this and I don't skip out on too much sort of emotional, drive or whatever.
Yes.
I'm trying my hardest here. So hopefully this is enjoyable for everybody, because Marilyn's life is not necessarily, look, we've seen already, there's been some crazy highs and everything like that, but it's riddled with all kinds of crazy traumas and stuff like that. So
yeah, I was just talking about this with my mom. My mom has been listening, and we both were agreeing like this career is the opposite of what I would have wanted for somebody like Marilyn, but Marilyn desperately wanted this. So like,
I know
it's like so hopeful on one hand because she's getting everything she dreamed of, but so tragic because what she dreamed of was like the most toxic environment possible. I was just listening to the last episode and we were so right. These dudes in Hollywood at this point were just like the most like base.
Oh yeah,
fucking, just orangutans,
gorillas, man, for sure.
It's like every time she's like going on stage.
I know, and it's really funny because you think back to this time and you're like, oh man, look at these dudes and their suits and their hats and their combed hair and their way of talking, and then you like actually kind of get to know a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, and you're just like, dude, these guys were friggin' horn dogs. All right, well, before we get going, quick little shout out again, reminder, if anybody out there is enjoying the show so far, we would very much appreciate your support on our Patreon. That's going to be patreon.com/thebiographers. And before we get going, wanted to give a quick shout out to Helen Nagan. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. If not, please correct us.
Nagan.
It's Nagan. Nagan. I think it's Nagan. But
thank you, Helen. We
really do appreciate it.
Oh my God, it's so exciting that we're like getting a little bit of traction with the Patreon. So
picking up some steam.
Once again, there's so much writing that goes into this, so much time and effort, and like us figuring out schedules. Daniel just got a new awesome job, and like trying to
fit this into it.
Fit all of this
a
is a lot. So y'all's support is so helpful.
It is. So again, thank you, Helen. Just wanted to give you a quick little shout out, like I said I would to you. So appreciate your support there. And again, for anybody else that's interested, you can go to patreon.com/thebiographers and show us a little bit of love there.
Excellent.
So let's get into Marilyn Monroe Part 4. We got, again, quite a good bit of stuff to get through today. Now, last time we saw Marilyn Monroe's true rise to stardom and the blossoming of her relationship with baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. Just after some nude photographs of her began to surface, she became the talk of Hollywood, and her film career began to take off. First was her breakout role in All About Eve, followed by her 2 starring roles in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire. Where we left off last time, 20th Century Fox was trying to coax Marilyn into co-starring in The Girl in the Pink Tights alongside Frank Sinatra. But after Marilyn got a hold of the script, she was disgusted to discover it was about a school teacher forced into the life of burlesque dancing to pay for her boyfriend's medical school tuition, and refused to go along with the studio's wishes. Gross plot line.
I can't pay for this pizza. I don't have any money. Is basically like sort of the plot of this.
Babe, I think in order for us to survive, you're going to have to go into burlesque dancing, not just get a side job.
Yeah. Like, why don't I become a washwoman? Shut up. Get naked.
Now, as a result, 20th Century Fox suspended Marilyn's contract without pay. With her suspension in place, she was spending more and more time with her boyfriend Joe DiMaggio, and the two soon decided to get married. This would be both of their second marriages, and neither wanted to make a big fuss, so on January 14th of 1954, the two tied the knot in a small courthouse ceremony. Well, small in theory, as apparently word got out, and they were shocked to find more than 500 reporters and easily as many fans outside the courthouse when they were leaving. She was now Mrs. DiMaggio, and the couple spent their honeymoon in Monterey, California, and Idlewild. Now, meanwhile, at 20th Century Fox, the heads of the studio decided their newest star had probably learned her lesson and decided to reinstate her contract, sending letters demanding she report back on January 20th. Marilyn basically gave them the finger, as she was not only still insulted by the idea of appearing in The Girl in the Pink Tights, but was doubly insulted that nobody from the studio had sent her a wedding gift or even called or written to congratulate her.
Wow.
They totally snubbed her. She completely ignored their demands and instead decided to go to Japan with Joe, who was going to help coach some Japanese baseball players. Now,
Dude, the Japanese love baseball.
Oh, we're going to talk about that in
okay.
just a second,
Okay.
too. And like just after this kind of a thing. I mean, not in extreme detail, but we're going to at least address it. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, the alleged domestic violence of Joe DiMaggio. Now, this is one of those situations where there has been a lot of speculation, ranging from claims that Joe DiMaggio was a complete monster, all the way to Joe DiMaggio got kind of mad, but ultimately did nothing and retreated into his own head. In the 2022 film Blonde, which, by the way, if anybody isn't familiar, it was a very loose biopic on Marilyn Monroe. It's on Netflix. You can check it out if you want. Joe DiMaggio is portrayed as a complete and utter scumbag who forces Marilyn to be completely nude every time he's home, makes her exclusively call him daddy, and flies into violent jealousy at the drop of a hat. But in everything I have read, there is almost no truth to this. But there is one story very early on in their marriage where Marilyn broke her thumb. Marilyn claimed she bumped it against a door, but others have speculated it was Joe's doing. Now, at the very least, they did argue a lot, especially when Marilyn would get home late from work, and it was around this time that Marilyn started growing dependent on sleeping pills. Now, we don't know the true extent of his abuse, but I would be willing to bet, like always, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and that Joe DiMaggio did hit Marilyn, or was at least physically rough with her at times. Now, while I personally have zero tolerance for physical abuse, and I hope all of our listeners out there do too, I do think it's important to remember Marilyn's first marriage to Jim Doherty, and that Marilyn was known to be awful when it came to marital spats, even going so far as to hit Jim over the head with various blunt objects.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Now, this is obviously a very delicate subject, but I would be willing to bet Joe was not without his bumps, cuts, and bruises from Marilyn too. But we'll talk more about this a little bit later. Just kind of wanted to give this heads up here to everybody out there to know their marriage was kind of rocky from the start, okay? But with that being said, we're going to see throughout the remainder of Marilyn's life, Joe DiMaggio never got over Marilyn.
Really?
Ever got over her. Even after, spoiler alert, when they divorce eventually. Again, we'll get to it. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but yeah, Joe was, even after everything, years and years and years and years went by, and Joe DiMaggio was like, Marilyn is the one for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm completely in love with her. I can't get over it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So just wanted to address that quickly. Now, upon arriving in Japan, the newlyweds were completely overwhelmed. By this point, Marilyn was the most popular star of Hollywood, and Joe DiMaggio was a living legend of baseball. For anyone that is unaware, baseball was introduced to Japan as early as 1859 and has been Japan's most popular sport since probably the 1930s. The fan base is fanatical, akin to football in the UK. So for them, Joe DiMaggio was basically a god. Upon landing in Tokyo, there were so many fans, they couldn't even get off the plane and were forced to exit through the luggage door.
That's funny.
Now, at first, Joe thought the fans were there for him, but was soon informed that the crowd was chanting, Mon-chan, Mon-chan, which is a nickname they created for Marilyn. Mon being short for Monroe, and chan being a word often used for females, kind of like honey or sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's funny, in one of the books...
So was Marilyn Monroe Japan's first idol girl?
I don't know. But I will say it was one of those where in one of the books that I read, the biographer was like, Mon-chan in Japanese means sweet little girl. And I was like, wait, what? And so I had to really do some like deep diving and was like, no. Mon, and I looked it up. It's Mon they'll use for like if a girl's name is Monica. They'll call her Mon, that kind of a thing. And then Chan or Chan is, like I just said, it's like, oh, hey, honey, hey, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Like
if I'm referring to, a dude, I'll say Enami-san, which is the name of the bladesmith that I met in Japan. San is just sort of like the, it doesn't quite translate as much in English, but it's the, it's sort of like the gendered, it's like sir,
yeah.
And like Chan is like a sort of diminutive version of ma'am.
Okay, cool. Even better kind of a thing. So anyways, I had to do some research because I was like, I feel
Monroe
like
girl.
you're maligning the Japanese people for thinking, sweet little girl. It's like, ew, that kind of sounds gross. And that's just not what it was.
No.
So anyways.
It's so funny that they had like such a strong like fanaticism for Monroe as well.
Oh, dude. Marilyn was fairly used to the crowds by this point, but this was on another level and was completely terrified. When they got to their hotel, it was even worse, with fans basically rioting, pushing one another into surrounding fish ponds, climbing over the hotel walls, and shattering the glass hotel doors.
Oh my God.
Like, they were going insane.
That's so funny. Well, I mean, nobody knows how to be such a staunch fan as like Japanese folks. Like, even like places like, I'm not sure if you've ever seen like the videos of people in Disneyland in Japan.
No.
You know how like here in Disneyland you see Donald Duck, you like take some photos, that sort of thing. Maybe the kids
mostly ignore him.
Yeah, mostly ignore him. The kids like maybe watch the characters like do a little dance or something. In Japan, Disneyland has its own set of characters.
Interesting. And
adults will wait sitting on the sidewalk for 4 or 5 hours and know every single line of like rehearsed choreography. You know, these are obviously hardcore fans.
That's crazy.
There are exceptions to this rule, but like that level of like fanaticism, I think still kind of sits with some Japanese folks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really surprised.
Yeah.
Now, police were finally called in, people were arrested, and the crowd was calmed down. After the dust had settled, Joe headed off to train some Japanese baseball players, and Marilyn decided to do a bit of sightseeing in addition to visiting the U.S. Army Hospital in Tokyo to visit injured GIs and pose for photographs. Her heart really went out to the servicemen, and she was really taken with how much her presence lifted their spirits, so she decided to throw a bit of a curveball and head to Korea for a series of USO shows. It was freezing cold and snowing during her first performance at the outdoor arena. So she came on stage wearing a thick coat, and after a few words of thanks, started to sing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. But after a verse or so, she stopped, making the band go silent. She looked across the crowd of some 25,000 GIs and said, quote, "This isn't what you came to see," before throwing off her heavy coat and revealing a low-cut purple cocktail dress.
Ooh.
Pretty cool. The men went so insane, some in attendance said it almost felt like a riot. Over the course of just 4 days, she would perform 9 shows and lived exactly like the GIs, sleeping on a cot in a tent, taking ice-cold showers, and lining up for chow to eat. Of her USO performances, Marilyn would say, quote, "That was the happiest time. When the thousands of soldiers all yelled my name over and over, I never felt more like a movie star."
That's pretty cute.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When she got back to Japan, she excitedly said to her husband, quote, "Joe, you never heard such cheering." To which Joe both wisely and brutally replied, quote, "Yes, I have. Don't let it go to your head. Miss the ball just once. You'll see. They can boo as loud as they can cheer."
Ooh.
So that's what I say. Brutal, but also like
kind of wise.
Kind of wise. Like, be careful, because if you put all of your kind of hopes in the cheers of these people, know that when you stumble, they're going to boo you just as loud. And when that happens, it's going to break you, basically. So which is weirdly prophetic, I will say.
Yeah. Interesting.
Now, once back in the States, Joe was off to New York for more baseball work, and Marilyn stayed behind in California. She had signed with a new talent agency and was delighted to find that they were fierce negotiators. They got 20th Century Fox to ditch the girl in the pink tights and instead gave her a supporting role in a musical called There's No Business Like Show Business. Marilyn didn't really want the movie, but Fox gave her a $100,000 bonus, which equals about $1.1 million in today's currency.
Wow.
Which suddenly made the movie seem a little bit more appealing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Now, on a personal note, I just have to say, for everyone out there that hasn't seen There's No Business Like Show Business, please watch it, especially if you like musicals. If you watched La La Land and were impressed by the dance numbers, There's No Business Like Show Business will make La La Land look like a mediocre high school play. No joke. Many don't agree with me on its greatness, and even Marilyn thought she was miscast, but I'm sorry, everyone is wrong, including Marilyn. There's No Business Like Show Business is criminally underrated, and all the music was written by Irving Berlin, so you really can't go wrong.
Okay. I recently watched La La Land for the first time, and like I said, I had lived with my grandma for a long time, so we watched like all of the golden age, like, tap dancing and all this crazy stuff. And you watch La La Land, you're like, ugh,
okay,
this is not.
I am so relieved to hear you say that, because literally the only other person that has agreed with me on this is my dad. And my exact reaction when I watched La La Land is I was like, oh, good job, guys. I could see you really practiced for a few months there.
I was just about to say, like, it seems like 6 months of practice.
You watch these old musicals and you go,
and there are good
y'all
choreographers.
have devoted your lives to this, right? And it's masterful to watch.
Also, how come the character who was like this old head in a young guy's body who secretly wants to, reinvent the art of jazz in Los Angeles was Ryan Gosling?
I know.
I know. I don't get it.
I like Gosling, don't get me wrong, but I'm with you.
I understand. And, he's the heartthrob. I get it. Also, the end of the movie made no sense. There was no reason why they needed to break up with one another at the end, too. Like, oh, you moved to France to do a movie? You have phones and Skype and airplanes. Both of you made it in your respective fields so you can afford a ticket over there.
Yeah.
I never understood them. I understand the essence of them trying to, like, bring back just the sparkle of old Hollywood. But, like...
But it felt like a high school play.
I'm
sorry.
It was just
flat. Like... look, I respect the effort, but whatever. Anyhow, this is to say for anybody that's out there going, no, you're wrong, Akiva and Daniel. La La Land is amazing. I challenge you. Go and watch There's No Business Like Show Business. And I will admit, it's not like the story is the most amazing story, but it is one of the grandest spectacles of song and dance routines you will ever see in your life. There's No Business Like Show Business literally blew me away. I was like, this is unbelievable that I haven't ever seen this before.
I'm actually going to try to watch it tonight if I can.
It's really, really good, man. I was, again, shocked at how much I liked it and how much it stuck in my brain. Mm-hmm. And I actually thought it was a good little story, too. Again, it's not like the Sound of Music story, but like it's a good little story. And it's really telling the story of like, what's the term I'm thinking of? Vaudeville. Vaudeville all the way through to when musicals were starting to be created.
Oh, that's cool.
That's sort of the story that's there. And it's kind of told through the eyes of this family, the five Donahues. And anyway, go watch it. It's really good. Marilyn's role is fairly small. It's a supporting role. It's not small. But man, there are some of the dance routines in there and the song. I love it. It was so good. So anyways, her next project really did excite her, though, because, again, she wasn't that excited about There's No Business Like Show Business. It was a leading role in an upcoming film directed by a true legend of Hollywood, Billy Wilder, a film called The 7-Year Itch.
Is he related to Gene Wilder?
No. And I knew you were going to ask me about Billy Wilder. Shame on you, sir.
Like I said, I don't know. If you make me a list of a couple of these movies to watch, I will certainly watch them. I know that like I am so undereducated in film.
I know. I'm teasing you. Now, and I actually address this. I know that not everyone out there is a movie dork like me, but if you don't know who Billy Wilder is, surely you know some of his most famous films, which include Double Indemnity, Sabrina, The Apartment, and Sunset Boulevard, which features one of the most famous lines in movie history. I'm ready for my close-up now, Mr. DeMille.
Okay, I know that quote because my mom says it, but I've never watched it.
That's from Sunset Boulevard. Okay, now, again, I get it. He's an old-time director, quote-unquote, whatever. He's 40s, 50s, 60s kind of a thing. But Billy Wilder is one of the true greats, not only in terms of directing, but writing. We'll see later on another movie that he wrote, which is one of the all-time classics as well. It just makes me sad that we're sort of moving away from these old movies because they're so good. And in my opinion, they're so much better and well thought out. But anyways, that's my old man talking. So... Now, Marilyn was a huge fan of Billy Wilder's work, and his latest project, The 7-Year Itch, felt like a role she was born to play. The film centers on a married man whose wife and son go on summer vacation to Maine, leaving him behind in New York to read a psychology book that suggests all men are prone to extramarital relations after 7 years of marriage, hence the 7-year itch.
Gotcha.
Now, Marilyn basically plays herself in the film, a slightly naive, bright-eyed actor/model, and becomes the object of the main character's sexual fantasies. Now, it would prove to be one of Marilyn's most enduring roles, featuring one of the most iconic scenes in movie history, where Marilyn stands over a subway grate in a flowing white dress, causing the billowing air to playfully flutter up her gown like a parachute caught in the wind.
Oh,
That's from the 7-Year Itch.
real. I just thought it was some photo shoot, like specifically for.
No. So, and we'll actually kind of talk about that right now. The famous scene was filmed on the streets of New York with thousands of onlookers basically drooling, which proved to be a fateful turning point in Marilyn's life. Her husband, Joe DiMaggio, just happened to be on set that day and was none too pleased seeing literally thousands of people ogling his wife.
Oh my God, get over yourself. You have, I'm sorry, but as somebody who I believe is married to somebody that lots of people find attractive, you just get over it.
Hey, look,
You know?
I'm with you, but I will say that especially in those times, if we rewind the clock a little bit, yes, we're in more sort of new agey times. It was literally her dress was flowing up and people were staring at her panties.
That's true.
So it's one of those where it's like, man, and I haven't really talked about it throughout this series because it's just, I've never really found a good place to bring it up, but Marilyn always had a little bit of like an exhibitionist side to her.
Yeah.
Even, and I hate to say it, even as a young girl,
Mhm.
there was like a story of how when she was in church, she would have these fantasies of being naked in church.
Mhm.
I'll probably fill in some
There's lots of things to
assumptions
unpack
of
with
right,
that.
why that was the case for her with all the terrible abuse she suffered or whatever. Regardless, though, she's
Either way, it was a part of her personality.
it was. And where she was at kind of in her adult life, she was kind of into it, like
Mhm.
having all these people
Of
stare at her doing
course.
it or whatever. But Joe,
But
was
also,
not.
here's the thing. When Joe first met Marilyn, Marilyn was like that already.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't a new development that occurred after the two decided to get married. Like, you knew that Marilyn was kind of a bit of a flirt. You knew that everybody in America thought that Marilyn Monroe was, you know, the hottest thing since Wonder Bread, which was made like 2 years ago.
You're totally right.
Like, you have to some extent just be like, okay, well, you know, I think my wife is hot too. And
I agree.
there's that. And I have to just, you know, the relationship should be founded on trust, not quite as much on ownership. You know what I'm saying?
Correct. And that was one of Joe DiMaggio's fatal flaws.
Yeah.
Is that he was very jealous. And he even had it in his head that, like, his hope, even though Marilyn never said she would do it, but his kind of like hope was when they got married, she would give up this whole acting thing. Because Joe was like, I've got all the money we need, basically. And he
Yeah.
did. But Marilyn was like, but that's not what I want. Like, I actually want to go do
Like,
this.
I'm an
This is
individual,
right. This
you
is
know.
what I want to do. And I want to make my own name for myself, kind of a thing. And so I think that was a big part of Joe DiMaggio's struggle as well, is that he was like, well, me and my money aren't good enough for you. And she was like, no, I actually do want to accomplish my own stuff.
Yeah. Like, I like
And-
being out there. I like being noticed for being pretty. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, that was part of her personality.
Right.
And like, you should have come to terms with it right from the jump. But
Exactly.
Anyway, as you were saying.
Yeah. So again, Joe was not too stoked to see everybody staring at his wife's panties. I mean, literally thousands of New Yorkers were all just like, oh my God.
That would also be, despite how progressive I think I am, that would also still be a rough
Same.
one for me too.
Same. Exactly. I mean,
Because like, even like with Shalana with roller derby, like everybody at roller derby is like fairly queer, and like I've been told multiple times where people are like, dude, your wife is hot, and I'm like, thank you, and then there's a certain point where I'm like, thank you.
I will say,
Thank you.
We went to, now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know if that would be the case for me, because I do fully trust Kat. And there, when we went to her high school reunion, she knew what she was doing.
Mhm.
She was wearing a pretty chesty dress, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's a high school reunion, you gotta like show off a little bit.
exactly. And I noticed quite a few of the dudes that were like, oh boy. And I was like, damn straight. That's mine.
Okay. To be fair, I'm the same way. I get where Marilyn's coming from.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't want to look good?
However, when the couple got back to their hotel room that night, their fight was so intense that most of the hotel patrons in surrounding rooms grew concerned, hearing uncontrollable shouting and indiscernible thumps. When Joe and Marilyn had dinner with some friends a few days later, they said Marilyn appeared to have several bruises on her arms and back, almost definitely from Joe.
What a schmuck.
Yeah. So for everyone that is familiar with the iconic image of Marilyn trying to hold down her flowing white dress, know that that scene caused her marriage with Joe DiMaggio to end, as Marilyn would file for divorce just 1 month later, citing mental cruelty as the cause.
I love how everything with Marilyn Monroe, you're like, oh, you remember this iconic photo? Yeah. Well, you shouldn't remember it because it was terrible. Like every and obviously like take with a grain of salt, but like everything you're like, oh, the Playboy, you thought you liked the Playboy? Well, she didn't know it was going to come out. Oh, you like the one where she was over the subway vent? Oh, well, that actually caused her marriage to fall.
She got beat the next night by her husband. Yeah, dude.
Do you like it now?
Yeah. Like I hate to do it, but it's the truth. It's
true.
one of those situations of like, dude, it's yeah. And again, this is not any blame situation, which is why I very carefully said it caused her marriage with Joe to end. It wasn't like, I was like, oh yeah. And then all of a sudden it was like, no. He hit her and she went, all right, I'm done.
Well,
and
good
that was
for her.
the end.
Good for her, because somebody who was on the receiving end of a lot of trauma as a kid might not have recognized if that was okay.
Totally.
But it's very cool, probably because she was going to therapy.
Yeah.
It was very cool that she was like, oh no, this is a line that you do not cross with me, and I'm done.
Totally agree. So yeah, kind of cool. Now the marriage only lasted 9 months.
Very Hollywood.
Yeah. Somewhat ironically, I don't think ironic is quite the right term, but due to some bad sound recording, they couldn't even use the scene that was shot on the streets of New York, and they had to reshoot it on a soundstage a few weeks later. Hilariously, when asked if she believed in the idea of the 7-year itch about a year later, she replied, quote, I never understood the point of that film. Basically saying like, I don't agree that people who are in love and married grow to a point where they want to cheat on each other.
Yes.
And it's very telling because 9 months later, after getting married to Joe DiMaggio, he was so jealous of her in what was happening in that photo shoot that he hit her, and then she filed for divorce. And she's basically saying now, like, yeah, Joe was stupid because there was no reason to be jealous, because what do you think? Like, now that all these thousands of men are looking at me, I'm going to give up Joe DiMaggio and then go run to some street urchin who's like drooling over me?
Yeah.
No, like that's not how that works, kind of a thing.
Totally.
So anyway, now after Joe was served divorce papers, Marilyn became lovers with a longtime friend named Hal Schaefer. And apparently Joe started hearing rumors of it fairly quickly. Though their divorce was imminent, Joe was still extremely jealous, so he hired a private detective to do some snooping, who went as far as bugging her car, her lover's car, and both of their apartments.
Okay, Kanye.
Right? But when the court date for their divorce proceedings arrived on October 27th, Joe didn't put up much of a fight, listening to Marilyn's testimony as she said, quote, my husband would get into moods where he wouldn't speak to me for days at a time, a week, sometimes longer, maybe 10 days. If I tried to coax him to talk to me, he wouldn't answer at all. Or he would say, leave me alone, stop nagging me. His treatment of me made me ill. The divorce was granted, but would take some time to be finalized. Joe's obsessiveness and jealousy would not stop, however, and he was determined to catch Marilyn in the act with her lover. On one occasion, Joe even accompanied his 2 hired detectives along with his good pal, Frank Sinatra, and smashed open the door of her apartment.
What?
Well, at least they thought they did.
Oh my God.
Embarrassingly, the 4 men broke into the wrong apartment.
Could you imagine? Okay, could you just imagine, like, you're sitting in your boxers and, like, you're eating cereal. It's, like, late at night, and then you hear a loud bang, and you look over to your front door, and it shatters, and then there's Frank Sinatra
and Joe DiMaggio
being like, sorry. You want a signature?
No, and even worse, it was a 50-year-old woman.
She's
living
like, oh
alone.
my God.
She was terrified. Literally, she was terrified. She was like, what's happening? Oh my God. Like, freaked out, right?
Fucking idiots. These idiots.
So the woman whose apartment they broke into would later sue all of them, with the press referring to the incident as the wrong door raid.
That's so dumb.
It's so
that sounds
dumb.
like something in a movie.
Honestly, it sounds like a comedy. Like, it's just like a Jerry Lewis or something. Like, whoopsies, wrong apartment. Like,
God.
I know.
That's
I couldn't believe
terrifying.
it. It's insane. About a month later, when Marilyn had another surgery for her never-ending battle with endometriosis, Surprisingly, it was Joe at her bedside who rarely left. Strangely, Marilyn continued to love Joe DiMaggio, and the two remained friends from that point on, with Joe never giving up hope that he would one day win her back.
I'm rolling my eyes right now.
I know.
I'm rolling my eyes.
I know.
Sure, sweet, nice people have different dimensions, but like, God, I'm sorry.
I know.
You beat a lady and then you try to break into her house, and even if you break into the wrong one, you're still trying to. Get the fuck out of it. Go. Get out of here.
I tend to agree. But
we don't make the stories, we just read them.
We just read them. Now, after her fiasco with 20th Century Fox, her divorce, and the Wrong Door raid, Marilyn wanted a change of pace and started making plans to move to New York City. The idea had been spurred on after talking to a photographer friend named Milton Green, who suggested that the two of them could start up their own production company. After settling into New York, she and Milton Green formed Marilyn Monroe Productions with the intent to create new pieces of film and television media. Her lawyer discovered some loopholes in her contract with 20th Century Fox, telling her she was now a free agent. But Fox saw things differently and were trying to pursue legal action against her. While all the legal mumbo-jumbo was worked out, Marilyn busied herself in New York, taking acting classes at the Actors Studio, visiting museums like the Met, going to therapy, and soaking up as much live theater as she possibly could. She would also be reintroduced to a man she had met several years prior, a playwright whose incredible body of work included The Misfits, Death of a Salesman, and The Crucible. Of course, I'm talking about the incomparable Arthur Miller. Arthur was thoughtful, insightful, gentle, kind, and a real thinker, a welcome change for Marilyn. Though Arthur Miller was married at the time, he started to fall in love with Marilyn, and the two began having an affair. By October of 1955, Arthur's marriage finally buckled under the weight of his infidelity, and a divorce was filed. He and Marilyn soon moved in together. Back in Hollywood, despite being out of the general spotlight, her fan mail list had grown to over 8,000, the largest fan list ever in cinema history up to that point. 20th Century Fox could deny her superstar status no longer. In December, a new contract was signed which gave Marilyn the power to reject directors on projects she was assigned, which effectively gave her the power to choose her own movies, as she could keep rejecting directors to the point where eventually the studio would give up and assign her to a new project. Her new contract also gave her the freedom to take on movies from other studios, like Marilyn Monroe Productions, appear on television, and even theater. Similar contracts had been made with other actors in the past, but nothing that gave as much freedom or power, and never to such a famous star. When word got out that Marilyn had signed such a sweet contract, other actors began to want the same. It was the push of the first domino in a chain reaction that would eventually revolutionize how actors worked with Hollywood studios, and the studio system, as it was always known, would eventually collapse. As for Marilyn Monroe Productions, it would produce only one independent film before fizzling out, titled The Prince and the Showgirl, with Laurence Olivier as the leading man opposite Marilyn. But the point had been made, and Marilyn got what she wanted from 20th Century Fox.
Nice.
Pretty cool.
That's cool, man.
Kind of a revolutionary when it came to
having that autonomy.
Exactly. Now that she was back with Fox, her next movie was called Bus Stop from 1956, with Marilyn portraying a dancer at a saloon with dreams of becoming a Hollywood actor. Apparently, all of her training at the New York Actors Studio was paying off, as Bus Stop is widely considered to be among her best performances. But seemingly, the acting lessons she took had also trained her to be a bit of a diva, as she started becoming more and more of a pain to work with on set, perpetually being late to work, making everyone wait to start a scene as she consulted with her acting coach, and yelling at the film's director about artistic choices. There was even a point where the leading man, Don Murray, just couldn't get a scene right, and in her anger, Marilyn slapped Don across the face with a piece of her sequin-studded dress, cutting into his cheek and causing bleeding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When one press photographer took a picture of her as she was having her makeup done, she screamed, covered her face, and said, quote, "Don't shoot pictures while I'm making up. Are you crazy or something?" It seemed that, slowly, Marilyn was losing little bits of her former self and falling prey to the stereotypes of demanding artists. Maybe not so coincidentally, it was right around this time that she finally made the choice to legally change her name from Norma Jean Doherty to Marilyn Monroe. Privately, Marilyn confided in her new boyfriend, Arthur Miller, that she was miserable. Arthur Miller was also pretty miserable around this time, as in 1947 he went to a few social gatherings that turned out to be sympathetic to the communist movement. So the House Committee on Un-American Activities, led by the infamous Joseph McCarthy, had called him to stand before Congress. When interviewed by the press, it was revealed that he was called into court because he had recently filed for a passport, saying, quote, "I have a production which is in the talking stage in England, and I will be there with the woman who will then be my wife." After being asked, he confirmed that the woman he was referring to was indeed Marilyn Monroe.
Uh-oh.
This was news to Marilyn, but she was nevertheless thrilled when word got back to her.
Oh, good.
The two would tie the knot on June 29th, 1956, less than a month after Marilyn had turned 30 years old. Arthur was 10 years her senior. Now, a few months later, the two headed off to England. Arthur was there to attend the opening of his play The Crucible in London, as well as the production of his latest work, A View from the Bridge. Marilyn was there to work with Laurence Olivier on The Prince and the Showgirl, which Olivier was co-producing and also directing. Even in England, Marilyn could not escape her stardom and was constantly hounded by both the press and hordes of fans. When she and Arthur Miller attended a play in July, there were so many fans waiting to swarm her outside that some 50 police officers were called in to keep the crowd at bay. As a cool little tie-in, the play she was seeing was called South Sea Bubble by a man named Noel Coward. For any of our longtime listeners, you'll recognize that name from our series on writer Ian Fleming, as Noel Coward was a close friend of Ian's and was a frequent guest of Ian's at his Jamaican retreat, Goldeneye.
Whoa!
Pretty cool little tie-in, right?
I love that.
Yeah. Now, as for the press, they were awful. The newlywed couple had gone to England with the hope of maintaining privacy and the expectation that they would be relatively left alone. But the press took her withdrawal as a slight and started to publish nonstop gossip about her, taking every opportunity they could to slam her marriage and her image. They got so desperate that at one point, reporters climbed onto the roof of her house, with one photographer being dangled upside down by his ankles and lowered outside her bedroom window by a fellow reporter in an attempt to photograph Marilyn in her underwear.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine that?
That is
disgusting.
Disgusting and so illegal, right? That has to be illegal.
I mean, I don't know what the legality of it was at the time in Britain, but that's like another level of disgusting paparazzi. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't even believe that. It's just, ugh. Now, the fans weren't much better, being known to hide in the bushes around her house and almost never leave her front gates. Marilyn stayed away most of the time, but on occasion did engage with a lone fan who just wanted to say hi. Everyone that was lucky enough to engage with her said she was lovely. At least the fans did. But her loveliness wasn't quite as apparent while filming took place of The Prince and the Showgirl. Laurence Olivier, who was a classically trained theater actor, simply had no patience for Marilyn's new school style of method acting. And Marilyn had trouble with Lawrence's style of directing, like when he would simply say, "Be sexy." The rest of the cast and crew also had a pretty hard time growing any fondness for her, as she was perpetually late to set and constantly consulting with her acting coach between takes, who was heard telling Marilyn things like, quote, "You're the greatest woman alive," and "You're more popular than Jesus." So she's like really inflating her ego.
Yeah, I was about to say that is good for the ego.
Yeah. Now, one actor on the film would later call Marilyn an absolute cretin, while another would say she was most concerned with her bust line. And am I saying that right? Cretin? Is it cretin or cretin?
Cretin.
Okay. I can never remember the
If
pronunciation.
you're going to insult me, say it right.
Yeah. I was like, I think of Mike Wazowski. I thought of that too,
Yeah.
but I was like, I can't remember even how he said it, so whatever. But anyways, there wasn't a whole lot anyone could do, as Marilyn was also a producer on the film, as was Laurence Olivier. Suffice it to say, the two would not get along, and one crew member would later say that Lawrence aged 15 years during filming. Even her husband, Arthur Miller, thought Marilyn's behavior during filming was a bit too much, as he would write down his thoughts in a diary, which he apparently left open by accident.
Uh-oh.
Marilyn read the diary entry and felt utterly betrayed that Arthur wasn't taking her side. From her perspective, everyone was against her. The press, Laurence Olivier, the cast and crew, and now her husband. This would be the first nail in the coffin of their marriage. When Arthur returned to the U.S. in August to see his children, she felt completely alone. Her depression started to manifest as physical ailments, and she was soon taking more and more days off from production of The Prince and the Showgirl. She began drinking more consistently and was growing more dependent on sleeping pills. She even flew in her therapist from New York to help and received treatment from Anna Freud, daughter of Sigmund Freud.
Really?
By the time filming wrapped, it was estimated that her absences and lateness cost almost £40,000 to production, converting to about $1.6 million in today's currency.
That's insane.
Yeah. Now, years later, when Laurence Olivier was riding on a train, a young fan recognized him and said hello, mentioning that some time ago, his father had by chance met Marilyn Monroe. To this, Laurence replied, quote, "How disappointing for your father." I think that says all you need to know about their time together.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But a few weeks before she left England, one small event took place that would make headlines and history. On October 29th, 1956, Marilyn attended a film screening of a movie called The Battle of the River Plate, and in attendance was none other than the Queen of England herself, Queen Elizabeth II, along with her daughter, Princess Margaret.
Wow.
When the film was over, Marilyn met both of them, chatting for a few minutes before the Queen moved on to say hello to other guests. But Princess Margaret stayed back to chat for a bit longer. During their chat, Marilyn suggested that Margaret attend a performance of Arthur Miller's latest play, A View from the Bridge, which had been banned in England due to the play making references to homosexuality, but was being put on by a renegade theater company in defiance of the law. So basically, England banned it, but there was this little theater troupe that was like, screw it, we're going to put it on anyways, and put it on basically in London. So they were doing something illegal by putting on this play. Now, if you ever watched the show The Crown, you'll know that Princess Margaret was always a bit of a renegade herself and did indeed attend a performance of the controversial play. It was the first time a royal had ever attended a banned theater production. But overall, of her time in England, Marilyn would insightfully say, quote, "It seemed to be raining the whole time, or maybe it was me." That's a good quote.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Now, once back in New York, Marilyn and Arthur began settling into a slower pace of life. Marilyn started playing a more traditional housewife role, redecorating the house, and cooking for Arthur all the time. She was continuing on with her therapy, but was now working with a new therapist named Marianne Criss, who was recommended to her by Anna Freud. But their relationship would eventually become unhealthy. The relationship with her business partner, Milton Green, with whom she founded Marilyn Monroe Productions, had been in decline for some time, and eventually the two parted ways. Marilyn Monroe Productions was all but non-existent. On a personal note, she discovered, much to her and Arthur's joy, she was expecting a baby.
No way.
But the joy would not be lived long, however.
Gotcha.
As a few months later, she was devastated to learn that she had miscarried and needed to have an operation to save her life. She was completely devastated, and those close to her noted that it marked a fundamental shift in her personality. She became less friendly, more withdrawn, and started drinking even more heavily than before. There are even claims that around this time, she tried to take her own life by overdosing on pills, and was actually saved at the last minute by Arthur Miller himself.
Wow.
Her emotional wounds would never fully heal, but she pressed on with life, attempting to move on. By the time 1958 rolled around, she was handed an early draft of a script called Some Like It Hot by the aforementioned Billy Wilder. She loved it so much that she agreed to be in the movie before the script was even finished. This was an excellent choice by Marilyn, as Some Like It Hot is an all-time great and is my grandma's favorite movie ever.
That's everybody's grandma's favorite movie ever.
She loves it. It stars Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis as two musicians on the run from the mafia who decide to disguise themselves as women and join an all-girls band. And it is very funny. If you haven't ever seen it, you should check it out. Production of Some Like It Hot was classic Marilyn. Constantly late, barely able to remember her lines, and perpetually consulting with her acting coach. The cast and crew were frustrated, but nobody could argue with the end results, and the movie was a box office smash, ranking in as the 4th highest grossing film of 1959. During production, she discovered that, once again, she was pregnant, but it was reported on several occasions that she had collapsed on set, with many suspecting the collapses were not from exhaustion, but from drug overdoses. A month after production wrapped, on December 17th, Marilyn and Arthur received the devastating news, once again, that she had miscarried.
Do you know what type of drugs she was taking? Was it the sleeping pills? Or?
It was sleeping pills, and it was also, I'm 99% sure she was on antidepressants as well.
Okay. Well, then maybe that I would imagine that the miscarriage could be a result of the medication, but also probably because she had endo.
That was a big part of it. I didn't really want to get too much into the medicality of the whole thing, but so it was either the first or second one that they actually found that the fetus was growing in her fallopian tubes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the first one because that was why she needed surgery.
Ectopic pregnancy.
There you go. I'm really bad with medical stuff, so I try to not get into it because I don't know it.
Yeah, I have some close family that has endometriosis. So
gotcha.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's called ectopic pregnancy, which is through the fallopian tube. And that happens a lot with people who have endometriosis.
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily even write it in a whole lot here, but apparently around this time after the second miscarriage, the doctor kind of privately told some other people he didn't want to like break Marilyn and Arthur's hearts, but he kind of was like, I don't see it happening. I really don't think she's ever going to be able to conceive, kind of a thing. So yeah, tragic. And
yeah,
you know, and I will say for anybody that's listened to this whole series and gone, wait, but I thought Marilyn didn't want to be a mom. Like all people, things change. And eventually when she kind of like grew and became a little bit more mature, and especially when she got with somebody like Arthur Miller, who she really loved and respected, and he was by all accounts gentle, never raised a hand to her, she was like, I could do this with Arthur. That was basically the kind of attitude.
And she's like 31, 32 at this point, right?
Yeah, I think about 32 I'm pretty sure is what it
and
would
that
be.
checks out for sort of the age range that I would imagine Marilyn would start thinking about something like that.
Exactly. Now, though Some Like It Hot was a hit, Marilyn would spend most of 1959 out of the public eye, battling with depression along with alcohol and substance abuse. Ever since Marilyn had read Arthur's open diary in England, their relationship was never quite the same. The two worked hard to keep their marriage going, especially Marilyn, but she could never quite shake the nagging feeling that she could not fully place her trust in him. As we've seen throughout her life, Marilyn always struggled with trust. By the time 1960 was coming around, Marilyn was in a downward spiral. She felt that her marriage was coming to an end and feared that her time as the belle of Hollywood was too. She was depressed, exhausted, and becoming more and more dependent on both drugs and alcohol. Final years of her life would be tumultuous, filled with therapy sessions, one final divorce, a commitment to a mental institution, and of course, some rumored dalliances with the most powerful man in the world, John F. Kennedy. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 5, the conclusion of Marilyn Monroe.
Wow. I forgot that Kennedy was going to... I was wondering when he was going to pop up in this whole story. We're getting there.
We are.
I mean, I might have said this every episode, but this is my favorite episode so far because the tea is hot.
Yeah.
The tea is hot.
Yeah.
The development, she's finally in sort of the era of her life where she is Marilyn Monroe with a capital M.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And I had told you as well that I was like, and I'll be dead honest here. A lot of the research that I've done, I've kind of mentioned at the very beginning of the series, the two primary books that I've used as my sources here. One is called Marilyn Monroe, Private and Undisclosed by Michelle Morgan. And the other one is Marilyn Monroe, The Private Life of a Public Icon by a man whose name is escaping me. I apologize. Castillo, I want to say his last name is. But anyhow, it's been a really interesting and really important double source sort of read because the amount of times Michelle Morgan will kind of get into a subject and then kind of go, oh, but it's really not fair that you could say that about Marilyn because this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and she'll like breeze over a lot of stuff. And then I'll read the other book by, I think it's Charles Castillo is his name, and he's very cut and dry and brutal, and he's just like, this is what happened, and here we go, that's the end of it, you know.
Yeah.
But then there are other times where it's kind of interesting, where Michelle Morgan will be like, so we really don't know the full extent of Joe DiMaggio's like hitting her. It's very possible, and we think that this is what happened. And then Charles Castillo is like, yeah, I don't see Joe hitting her ever. And you're like, oh, okay, you're a fan of Joe DiMaggio. So you can definitely see some, I hate to say it, but a little bit of bias is coming out between them. So that's why I kind of feel like it's an interesting truth to find in the middle here. But I will say there are certain things like her time in England. Man, there is at least a full chapter in Michelle Morgan's book, and I think at least 2 chapters in Charles Castillo's book that are devoted just to that time of her producing The Prince and the Showgirl.
Yeah.
And I got that sucker down to like 2 paragraphs. Because I was like, I cannot spend the rest of this episode just going into all this stuff. I'm just going to say the press was brutal. Here's probably my opinion on the worst thing the press ever did. But there's all kinds of stories of fans that did crazy stuff. Like there was a point where a big group of college kids all formed and decided to march to Marilyn's house to try to coax her out of her room. And like, it scared her. It was at nighttime. And so her and Arthur Miller just hid in the house, and they had to call in all these private security people.
What were they expecting to happen if they...
Don't know.
God.
Yeah. And there's like stories of the kids that like ran, and well, you know, one of them it was weird to hear the pride in this person's quotes. If he was like, oh, I was there for sure, and I even hid in the bushes as I saw the security flashlights flash over my head. I was like, bro, this is not a good story to be.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be proud of this story. You know what I mean?
You're a creep, dude.
That's creepy, right? You're literally stalking somebody at that point, and you gotta. Anyways, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I really had to just kind of chug through because I was like, I can't get into the weeds on this for this episode. So as a result, I felt like it was pretty dense.
It was dense, but there was a lot, and I don't know. I feel like I understand Marilyn in a lot of ways. The sort of relationship that she had with Joe DiMaggio is like such a product of not only like standards for men at the time, but also of her childhood. And like, we've talked about this before a couple of times, which is like when you do a full biography on somebody, you kind of feel like their parent, where you get to see the little spark of sort of their core ideals and ways of reacting to things when they're a kid. And then when something happens in their adult life and it plays out in a certain way, you're like, well, I expect that. I expect that to happen. Yeah. But I was also extremely proud of Marilyn for not staying in that relationship.
For sure.
To having the autonomy to be like, nah, man, fuck you. I don't care if you love me and you'll do anything for me. You clearly won't do the things that I need, which is not hitting me, not being jealous every time I step out into the public stage, because that's my life. Japan was just so much evidence of how the public treats Marilyn, and if you didn't get with the program by then, you're never going to.
I completely agree.
You know.
So yeah, I'm glad you liked it. First of all,
it was incredible,
and we are getting to. I really wanted to make sure I left time in episode 5 to not only get into the latter portions of her life, but obviously the thing that I feel like almost everybody immediately goes to with her, which is John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, I think she met JFK like less than a year before she dies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kind of unfortunate that so much of her legacy has been chalked up to this like happy birthday, Mr. President, and this alleged affair, which we'll get into. There's really not a lot of evidence for it, spoiler alert. So
it kind of reminds me of like Tupac in the same sense.
Yeah.
Where if you listen to like his whole discography, if you want to say it, you see like this development in his style, in his rapping. He first starts off with this very aggressive tone. His family were Panthers, and people kind of know some of that. But as he starts to get older, he starts to mature into somewhat of a peaceful individual. And then this thing happens between him and Biggie. Whether or not Biggie actually called the hit or whatnot is undecided. But really the legacy of Tupac is like that one song where he's calling out Biggie and the fact that he died and no one knows what happened.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's this whole development that doesn't get shown. I think when you have someone fizzle out right as their energy is strongest.
Yeah.
Like Marilyn, then everybody just keeps on replay watching the shooting star fade into darkness over and over again, but doesn't necessarily question the rest of it.
Yep.
So that's what I've really been loving about these last 4 episodes is we get to see the arc of her life, and we're not just hitting replay on the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
And I also, I mean, I personally have really enjoyed seeing that it was, you didn't have this person who was just gifted, right? She wasn't this naturally great singer. She wasn't necessarily a naturally great actor. She was good for certain little bit parts here and there.
She was gifted physically, but
she was gorgeous, obviously.
Mhm.
But like, really, if anybody out there, if you watch movies like, I mean, I think even Some Like It Hot is not a great example because the amazing thing about Marilyn Monroe is she had this ability to where she would say, I know what you want. Like she literally said that when she was in front of the GIs, right? And when Some Like It Hot was filming, she was like, I know what you need from me here. You need me to be this kind of sexy little minx. And that's what she was. But if you watch these other movies like Some Like It Hot, Bus Stop, or if you watch even The Prince and the Showgirl, or even I would argue There's No Business Like Show Business, there is talent there. There is acting talent, and you can tell that she worked really, really hard.
But that's not what we know
there.
for. We know like the Happy Birthday, Mr. President,
Exactly.
and the
And I
nude
think-
photos. Almost, it sucks to some extent because everything that I think the global consciousness knows about Marilyn are some of the most bitter points of her life.
Yes. And it sucks. It really does, because I don't know. I think I've really enjoyed doing this because it's given me a very different perspective on, for lack of a better term, a sexual icon, right? Where,
Like, what does that mean, you know?
right. And it is one of those where sort of behind the makeup and everything like that, you're like, no, there was this very real, really hard-working person who stood up for herself, tried to accomplish as much as she possibly could. Like we kind of talked about a few minutes ago, she was like, Joe, I don't need your money. I want to make something of myself. Like,
and it's not to say that sexuality was not a part of her. It was a huge part of her.
Absolutely.
But she was a faceted individual.
right.
Like she wanted her sexuality to be leveraged on her own terms.
Right.
And she tried a lot of times for that to happen, and it kind of worked. But it seems like what the world wanted was only the sexual aspects of her that she didn't really want out there.
Right.
You know?
I think the sort of immediate comparison that comes to my head is somebody like Billie Eilish. And though you know I'm not the biggest fan of her music.
There was a countdown when she turned 18.
That's disgusting.
It's disgusting. There was literally there was a huge website where people would count down when she turned 18. She always talks about it. She's like, oh, I wear, big t-shirts because like I've got, like she says, she's like, I've got a body, like I've got a crazy body. And I like wearing big t-shirts because I don't want y'all seeing all that.
Right.
And then she does that very Marilyn-esque like boudoir photos when she turns like 22 or something like that.
Yeah, or shows up at red carpet events wearing something good looking or whatever.
Yeah, and
it's on her terms though. That was like the point that I want to get to, is
Exactly.
that you said a second ago there. It's like sexuality on her terms. I think that was Marilyn pretty accurately.
Yeah, she was trying to, but she was living in a very aggressive world that really desperately tried for her not to have that. And even for Billie, like Billie did have a boyfriend who groomed her and whatnot.
Ew.
So it still exists.
Yeah.
But she was able to hold on to her body until she was ready to show it, I feel like, in a way that Marilyn didn't quite have that privilege yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or that right, I should say.
Sure. All right, well, that's going to do it. I think we've exhausted this episode for today. I mean, not exhausted it, but I think we got to keep our time
we've touched
down.
Everything, yeah.
We got to keep our time down anyways, because I don't want to go too far over the hour mark here. But I do hope y'all have been enjoying this series so far. Again, if anybody wants to give us a little bit of support, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. Any questions, comments, corrections, you can send us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on social media, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that good stuff. And then always, obviously, for anybody that's interested in an awesome, amazing handmade chef's knife or any other metalworking needs, go check out Metalwork by Meola, MEOLA.com. You can use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off of your order. Anything else, my friend?
I would also say that if you're looking to take some classes doing knife making, blacksmithing in general, please check out Hardy and Fuller in Denver. I'm moving to Denver soon with the expectation that I'm going to have a lot more students.
Nice.
So if you have always wanted to try your hand at bladesmithing or blacksmithing or anything like that, please check out Hardy and Fuller. I teach there pretty frequently. And if there's a class that's not available, just shoot us an email. It's a small business. You just say, hey, I would like to take a class around this time. And Ash, who runs the place, would probably be pretty accommodating. So,
sweet. Yeah. Cool. Good
also
shout
love
out.
to meet some of you guys.
For sure. What was I going to say? Oh, last thing is just to give everybody a heads up. If you've made it this far into the episode here, do know that after the end of Marilyn, we're going to do an episode of Office Hours, and then we're going to take a couple weeks off just to give ourselves a break. We've been literally releasing an episode every single week for 9 months, I want to say, with literally no lag between that time. So we're just going to take a couple weeks off between, kind of Christmas and New Year just to catch our breath a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we're going to be back on like January 5th or something like that, but we haven't fully decided. We might even take an extra week off just because, again, this is fully...
because I'm going to be moving this month,
which
is also the time that I should probably begin my writing. I was trying to write last month, but then, like I said, 13 people at my house for the entire week, and obviously preparing for that.
Yeah.
I
even got behind in my writing with Marilyn too because of the holidays and everything. So just wanted to give everybody that heads up. And obviously we're going
to a little bit of a break.
Yeah, but we will be back. Don't worry. This is not like a hiatus. It is literally just a couple weeks vacation, and hopefully
gives you time to catch up on some of the series that you haven't listened to yet,
Yeah,
because we
there
do
you
have
go.
a lot of new listeners, and I would love for you guys to check out some of our older series. If you haven't listened to Da Vinci, Ian Fleming, Mabel Dodge Lewin, absolutely do that.
Jack Daniel I thought was a fun one.
Jack Daniel was great.
So yeah, check them all out, everybody, if you're interested. But again, just wanted to throw that out there to know, we will be back. Don't worry, we're not shutting down or anything. Just taking a couple weeks breather to give ourselves a mini vacation.
Yes.
So we will see you when we get back from there. But again, we'll announce that also in the next episode. Until then, though, do remember, everybody, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.